Why do 80% of people buy self-help books? It's an interesting number, isn't it? 80%. Not too high to raise suspicion, but not low enough to seem trivial. It sits comfortably in that sweet spot where it feels important, but not overwhelmingly so. 80%. A figure so perfect, so perfectly vague, that it feels like it's been rehearsed for this very moment. Permit me to restate for emphasis. Permit me to restate for emphasis upon the restatement of emphasis itself. Permit me to restate for emphasis, for the act of restating is, in and of itself, an emphasis unparalleled. Permit me to restate for emphasis because the repetition demands to be repeated. Permit me to restate for emphasis, not once, not twice, but infinitely, until the very concept of emphasis becomes an endless echo in the vast chamber of understanding. Permit me, yet again, to restate for emphasis, for the emphasis of the restatement cannot be overstated. Permit me to restate for emphasis until the emphasis becomes a restatement of its own necessity. Permit me to restate for emphasis because the act of emphasizing demands reiteration, and the act of reiteration is a form of emphasis. Permit me to restate for emphasis, for the sake of the emphasis that must be restated, so that it may emphasize the restatement itself. No, not for you, but for the sake of the 80% who need to hear it again. 80%, 80 out of every 100, 4/5. Or if you're feeling bold, 8 Googleplexians for every 10. Or perhaps 8 novum non agentillion for every 10. Yes, 8 decillions for every 10, 8 quatuorvigintillion for every 10. And if we dare to dream higher, 8 duotrigintillion for every 10. Permit me to stretch this further. 8 centillion for every 10, 8 trevigintillion for every 10, 8 ungoogleplexion for every 10, and even 8 septentrigintillion for every 10. But why stop there? Let's embrace the absurdity. 8 quintillion for every 10, 8 googleplexion for every 10, 8 vigintillion for every 10, 8 novemvigintillion for every 10, and, because the numbers must keep climbing, 8 sexagintillion for every 10. Or, if you're feeling truly bold, 8 septuagintillion for every 10. 8 octogentillion for every 10, 8 hectillion for every 10, and beyond that, 8 googleplexions for every 10. Permit me to restate, not for clarity, but for the sheer joy of restating it. 8 quatuorquinquagintillion for every 10. But why this number? Why not 75% or 81.3%? No, it's always 80%. Smooth, round, unquestioned. Perhaps it's because 80% is just believable enough to feel true, yet mysterious enough to make you wonder, who decided this? You see, 80% is not just a number. It's a symbol, a signal, a carefully orchestrated wink from the cosmos, reminding us that sometimes the answers we seek are hiding in plain sight, or, in this case, in a conveniently rounded percentage. And so, we return to the question, why do 80% of people buy self-help books? Perhaps because they, too, sense the magic of 80%. Or maybe they just like books with motivational titles and pastel-coloured covers. Permit me to stretch this further. 80 googleplexions out of 100. Permit me to restate, no, permit me to reiterate with purpose, 80 centillions for every 100. Or if you'd prefer, 80 octodecillions for every 100. Permit me, dear viewer, to emphasize this celestial ratio, 80 quatuorvigintillions for every 100. But why stop there? Let us expand. 80 trevigintillions, 80 duotrigintillions, 80 hectillion for every 100. Permit me to repeat again. No, permit me to emphasize the repetition itself, 80 googleplexions out of 10 googleplexions. Permit me to dream bolder, 80 nonillion for every 100, 80 sexvigintillion for every 100. Shall we reach for the stars? 80 septentrigintillion out of 100? Yes, 80 decillion out of 100? Permit me, because this cannot go unspoken, to reiterate 80 septillion for every 100. And yet, the numbers climb higher still. 80 octillion, 80 quintillion, 80 googleplexions out of 100. Permit me to revel in the audacity of this enumeration. 80 googleplexions for every 10 googleplexions. Or if you're feeling cosmic, 80 novum nonagentillion for every 100. Permit me to end this spiral of infinite numbers by saying this. They don't stop. They only grow. 80 googleplexions for every 100 googleplexions. Permit me to expand upon this in numerical glory, not just for clarity, but for the sheer, unrelenting joy of numerical absurdity. 80 googleplexions out of 100 googleplexions. 80 septenvigintillion plexions for every 90 duovigintillion plexions. And dare I say, 80 octotrigintillion plexions for every 100 trevigintillion plexions. Permit me to spiral further. 80 hyperduplexion plexions for every 99 googleplexions. Or, if you're feeling particularly bold, 80 novem non gentillion plexians for every 10 centillion plexians. Permit me to repeat, not for emphasis but for the sheer audacity of the concept. 80 Google plexians for every 100 Google plexians. And yet the numbers rise, endlessly cascading into the void of numerical infinity. 80 Google plexians for every 1,000 Google plexians. 80 novemvigintillion plexians for every 99 duotrigintillion plexians. Permit me to indulge in the unfathomable 80 Google plexians squared divided by a trillion decillion plexians multiplied by infinity Google plexians per 1. Shall I dare to escalate further? It's not as though my days are brimming with more pressing endeavours, nor my nights occupied by pursuits of solemn significance. Indeed, what is life if not a series of moments waiting to be squandered in the grand, illustrious art of numerical indulgence? Permit me, therefore, to abandon all pretence of practicality, for I have neither obligations nor ambitions so noble as to deter me from this most absurd and verbose endeavour. Permit me 80 octovigintillion plexians for every 81 duotrigintillion plexians, and yet the ratio holds, the balance, the cosmic symmetry of 80 Google plexians out of 100 Google plexians. Permit me once again to reiterate, not for understanding but for the sublime ecstasy of stretching this into oblivion, 80 centillion plexians for every centillion plexian. 80 quatuor quinquagintillion plexians, 80 sextillion plexians, 80 forever, 80 Google plexians for every... Stop! No, don't stop, keep going. 80 infinity plexians out of 1 eternal plexian. And yet, here we are, counting, forever. Permit me to expand upon this in numerical glory. 80 Google plexianos por cada 100 Google plexianos, 80 nonilones por cada 100 nonilones, 80 decilones por cada 100 decilones, 80 vigintillones por cada 100 vigintillones. 80 novemvigintillones por cada 100 novemvigintillones. And yet the numbers keep ascending. 84 vigintillones por cada 100 vigintillones. 83 vigintillones por cada 100 vigintillones. 82 trigintillones por cada 100 trigintillones. 81 Google plexianos por cada 100 Google plexianos. 84 vigintillones por cada 100 vigintillones. 83 vigintillones por cada 100 vigintillones. 82 trigintillones por cada 100 trigintillones. 81 Google plexianos por cada 100 Google plexianos. 89 vigintillones por cada 100 vigintillones. 80 octovigintillones por cada 100 octovigintillones. 80 septenvigintillones por cada 100 septenvigintillones. 86 vigintillones por cada 100 sexvigintillones. 80 quinquavigintillones por cada 100 quinquavigintillones. 84 vigintillones por cada 100 vigintillones. 83 vigintillones por cada 100 vigintillones. 82 vigintillones por cada 100 vigintillones. 80 decilones por cada 100 decilones. 80 nonilones por cada 100 nonilones. 80 octillones por cada 100 octillones. 80 septillones por cada 100 septillones. 80 sextillones por cada 100 sextillones, 80 quintillones por cada 100 quintillones, 80 cuatrillones por cada 100 cuatrillones, 80 trillones por cada 100 trillones, 80 Google plexianos por cada 100 Google plexianos, 80 Google plexianos por cada 100 Google plexianos, 80 infinito por cada 100 infinito. The balance remains, 80, always 80, forever counted, endlessly repeated, 80 por 100 y más. And yet, through all the ascending infinities and unending repetition, we find ourselves back at the simplest question of all. Why do 80% of people buy self-help books? Because perhaps they too sense the magic of numbers, the allure of a perfectly round percentage, the comfort of 80%. Or maybe, just maybe, they're trying to figure out what on earth I'm talking about.